Hello! We are here to present our religious project about religious individuals. And we have decided to interview 3 people from the Abrahamic religions, that is Islam, Christianity and Judaism. So we interviewed 2 Muslims, 2 Christians and 1 Jew. And we made sure that the Christians and Muslims we interviewed were 1 man and 1 woman. So we would have an equal research process and made sure to include everyone when researching and doing this project. However, since we only interviewed 1 Jew, we chose that to be a woman, since our little focus area in this project is women's rights in religion. So we thought of it to be appropriate for that to be a woman. The men we interviewed are about 45 to 50 years old, and the women we interviewed are about 35 to 40 years old. So there is a bit of a age difference, but we don't believe that to be very significant, since the age difference isn't that big, and there are still people from the same generation. However, if we had interviewed a teenager, for example, that would have been worth taking into consideration and mentioning what that person has said in contrast to the other people, since that is of a totally different generation and that might affect that person's belief and opinions. So in this presentation, we are going to explain what religious significance their religion plays in these people's daily life, what prejudices and stereotypes there might occur in the Swedish society against these religions, and also we are going to talk a bit about women's rights in this religion. So now Tessa will talk about religious significance.
Well, I'm going to talk about some of the questions we asked these individuals when we interviewed them. We asked several questions, however, we just decided to take in consideration those questions that will help us support our main idea, which is women's rights, later on. The first question we asked them was if they actively think about their religion in their everyday life, and if they think about their religion when they act, before they act, and when they're thinking and saying. We got some very unexpected and interesting answers, actually. We thought that Judaism and Islam were going to be the religions where it's most important and maybe more dominant. However, we came across as Christianity being very important in people's lives as well. We asked first, the answer we got of the 2 Muslims was that religion was very important in their lives, and that their religion was always behind their actions. One of them told us that they thought about their religion before they acted and thought if it was permitted or not, according to their religion. And the second Muslim answered similar to the first one. Our 2 Christians answered also very similar to Muslims. They told us that, one told us actually that the religion was her number 1 priority, and that everything she did was she thought about her religion first. However, the second one answered more like the Jew we interviewed. They told us that their religion did not control their lives, and that they thought about it unconsciously when they acted, and more how they have been educated and brought up, which their religion played a role in, but their actions were more according what they happened thought while little. And meanwhile, the Muslims and the first Christian told us that they think about their religion both consciously and unconsciously. We asked them a second question, and it was about celebrations and holy days. We asked them if they had any celebrations and holy days in their religion, and if they actively celebrated them. We got some very unexpected answers as well, since our Muslims told us that there were many celebrations in their religion, but some were celebrated more than others, and some were a little bit more important. such as they told us, for example, Easter was not as celebrated as Christmas, maybe. And they also gave us a concrete example of this. They talked about a celebration that is called Ramadan. It is about it's about putting yourself in the place of those who have less than you. What Muslims have to do, they can't eat before the sun comes down, and for a period of time. And this is how this they do to be considerate of others and put themselves in the position of a poor person. And this celebration is also about giving to others and those who have less than you. They told us that this celebration is very misunderstood by society, since many people think that if you fail at this, you're not religious anymore, which is not true. One of them told us that if you have tried your hardest, but you still failed, it's okay, it doesn't matter, because you have tried your hardest and actually tried and given your best, which is all Allah wants, according to the first Muslim. When we asked the Christians, they told us that there were many celebrations, as we know, we are maybe more familiar with, such as Christmas, Easter, and others. But one of them told us that she celebrated these celebrations or holy days because it was important for their religion and they have a very deep religious significance. But the second Christian and the Jew told us that they celebrated the celebrations just as a form of a tradition and not a ritual. They said that it was more to be with family and friends and a nice way of gathering and they don't think that as much of the religious significance. So it's more of a tradition rather than a ritual. The third question we asked them was about their family and if they had been brought up in a religious environment. We also asked them if those who had children or those who would maybe have in the future would inherit this religion to their children. And we got different answers, but overall the answer was yes. Our two Muslim individuals told us that, one told us that he would definitely pass the religion further on to his children, since he thinks it teaches them morals and very important things, and also what is appropriate and what is not. The second Muslim told us that she would like she had children, and she told us that she has been raising them to be religious at some level, but not she wanted them to experience it on their own. And this was really similar to the Jews' point of view, which I'm going to talk about later. But firstly, the Christians tell us that they wanted their children to be religious, since they also have been brought up in a religious family. But they didn't really talk about the religion in a way. Both actually said that they would want their children to be raised as they have been raised, as their parents have raised them in a religious way, and teach them right morals and to be considerate, empathic, etc. When we interviewed Galif, which is the youth, she told us that she did not want to force her children to be religious. She wanted to teach them about their roots to their religion and their family and traditions and everything, but she did not want them to be forced into a religion. She would teach them, but if later on they would want to be religious, it was up to them, and she would accept both, but she would want them to know where they come from. And these are the main questions that we discussed about. As you can see, they're very different from each other. But what we came across is that in Islam, it's more, I would say, the people that we interviewed, they are more, they think about the religion more than the Christians that we interviewed and the Jew that we interviewed. But the Jew made us know that she was not so religious, but she has been brought up in a religious environment, and she believed in her religion.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to pass the word to Linnea, who is going to talk about a very hot topic, which is stereotypes. There are stereotypes of different...
Sure.
She's also going to talk about if these stereotypes are applicable or not to the truth. So I pass the word on to you, Linnea.
Thank you, Tessa. So to fully understand what prejudices there are and stereotypes, what they are in the Swedish society, for example, we decided that the best thing to do was to go out and interview people on the streets. And what we asked them is if they knew something negative, something socially negative about these religions like Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And naturally, we received different answers, and some didn't even say something that was negative. But there were some that were quite similar. And that is, for example, that many considered Islam to have very strict rules, and that you would be banned from society if, or like their community, if you did not follow them. And with Christianity, some people, or like two people, said that Christians are hypocritical because while they encourage people to love their neighbor, they are at the same time against homosexuals. And when talking about Judaism, there are prejudices in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, for example, that people usually consider Jews to be pro-Israel in that conflict. So if we start off with Islam, when we brought up this to Muslims we interviewed, they basically agree that this view of Islam, that Islam is all about rules and it's a very unforgiving religion, well, that is basically generalizing. Because yes, there are several rules in Islam, but not everyone follows all of the rules. But even if they do, the most vital point in Islam is that they have this one single true God in common, Allah. And that is what in the end makes us all brothers and sisters. So then naturally they said that, well, people divide among themselves because of different interpretations of the religion. But that is natural for human beings, since it is easier for us to relate and socialize with people with our own views in general, or like views similar to ours in general. And we would like, Tessa and I think it's also important that since they have the same God, it's important what Stephen Prothero also stressed, that Allah is all forgiving, all good, and all knowing, and that is what in the end makes Islam beautiful. But what we reflected about was, well, how can these stereotypes, how did they come up in the first place? And we think a lot is due to the media. When reporting from conflicts in Arabic countries, usually Muslims are unfortunately portrayed as hysterical and sometimes, frankly, even like basket cases, which is very unfortunate. And we think that because of this, it is much more easier for people to accept prejudices that Muslims are very strict and unforgiving, because since the media portray them as crazy, well, then this must be true as well, which is very frustrating.
Especially the American media, I would say.
Oh yeah, especially with after 9/11.
Yeah.
And when we talked about the Christians, about that some people saw them as hypocrites, they wanted to stress the fact that this idea is generally based on outdated outdated facts, and based on a society that was in the past and is not really relevant in this present society that we have now. And they wanted to say that in the New Testament, which Christianity is based on, well, of course they say that the marriage between man and woman, that is sacred, and that is not said about the relationship between people of the same sex. But Christianity never says anything offensive of homosexuals, so that isn't really correct. And if we are to look at offensive criticism towards LGBTQ people, well, that place is to look in the Old Testament. But since Christianity is based on the New Testament, well, that isn't really relevant. And one of the Christians we interviewed also like that they had people who were LGBTQ in their church, and that they felt as welcome and as all of the others, and that they also found that their religion supported them in their daily life and the problems that they faced. So Tessa and I really would like to acknowledge that that isn't really this isn't generally the case when it comes to Christians, but at the same time we reflected that, well, we can still see traces of that LGBTQ people not being as accepted. For example, that some priests refuse to marry homosexual couples. And from my own experience, that my friend and his boyfriend, they were kissing outside a church, and then a priest came out and yelled at them that they were being disgraceful and disgusting and etc. But in the end, we must remember that there will naturally always be differences, and I think that society is very tolerant now as it is. And there are homophobic people even though they're not Christian or of any other religion. But we would think that it's important to, this really says that it's important to keep Stephen Prother in mind and what he says about considering all the aspects of a religion, not just the good sides, not just the bad sides, but everything that is included.
To truly understand the religion.
Precisely.
And be open to the idea. And we think that stereotypes are seen due to that people are not informed properly and they choose to believe everything they see in the media.
Yeah.
And it can be at some point
That
also ignorance why stereotypes are so popular.
Precisely.
But we think that informed people and open people, by seeing this interview in this video, we realize that not all stereotypes are true.
No,
of course there are some that are maybe at a certain level true, but not all of them.
Yeah, no, you shouldn't generalize. And when talking to the Jew, and when we talked about the Jew, we talked with the Jew about this prejudice about the Israeli conflict, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, she was very frustrated. First we can explain what this conflict is about. It was like after the Second World War, and the Jews many Jews have suffered in the Holocaust and etc. And then it was decided to give the Jews a country for their own.
The British decided.
Yeah. And this was, we can see this almost as a deed of guilt almost, and it was good intentions behind it. But however, the country that now is Israel, that they were sent to, there were other people living there, which immediately caused a lot of issues and a lot of debates about this, which are still going on today about whose country is it. Yeah. And,
which divided the country of Israel into two parts. One part that is from the Muslims, and the other part which is from the Jews.
Oh yeah, Palestinians and Israelis. Yeah. So and generally there seems to be a view that people think, oh well, Jews must naturally believe that Israel should belong to the Jews. And when we brought this up to the Jew we talked to, she was very frustrated, since this is putting together politics and religion, and just because you are a Jew, that doesn't mean that you have certain political opinions about a matter. And she thought this was very problematical. And she wouldn't she said that this definitely is a problem, and she has experienced it herself, and that this can be a problem in her daily life. And Tessa and I reflected about, well, if Judaism is associated with these political views, well, then that can be a problem when meeting new people and they finding out that you're a Jew, because then they might have a negative approach towards you, not because of your religion, but of your assumed political opinions, which might...
Since it is seen as if the Jews right now are the, bad guys, or since they feel that Jews have been through many terrible things,
Yeah.
and they feel like as if they're doing the same thing to others now. And as a Jew, she said she doesn't want to be represented by that. She wants to be just a normal person, and a religion has nothing to do with her political point of view. It's like stereotypes. I think that it comes from the political. So you have what we have learned, me and Lydia. You have to separate the factors that are not involved in the religion, and just
you shouldn't generalize.
Yeah, it's very bad when you generalize.
And now we will move on to women's rights.
Yeah.
That Tessa will talk to us about.
Yeah, well, we talked through the whole presentation about women's rights and the different religions. We came across some very interesting things when we interviewed these people. I interviewed two Muslims. One of them told me that women were the stereotype of women being oppressed in Islam is not true at all. Which we can see, they're not forced to wear the
hijab or burqa.
Yeah, they're not forced to wear. It doesn't say any of that in the Quran. But we don't know how to interpret, because when we interviewed the other Muslim, we asked him about women's oppression and stereotypes, and he answered, I quote. He said, "Women are not oppressed in Islam, even if people may think that. The simple fact that will contradict the statement is that Allah gave women the right to live, and the right to live as free." I asked him to further explain this, but he gave us a very similar answer.
Yeah.
This can be up for interpretation, but you can still see by this saying, I'm not generalizing the whole religion, but according to him, you can see some traces of difference between male and female. And then we talked to the Christians and about equality. They told us that the relationship between a man and woman is sacred, meaning that both man and woman are sacred and equal. That's their answer, and we draw the conclusion that, of course, there will always be a gender difference within every society and every religion. But the Christians that we interviewed said that in their religion, man and woman were equal. Now Lina is going to talk about Judaism.
Yes, the Jew that we interviewed brought up the head covering issue as well, and that is also something that is present in Judaism, that women should cover their heads. But she said that even though she had not experienced that in her family, because they were not very religious, they had the traditions, but they were not that religious, so she had not experienced this. But since she grew up in Israel, she had experienced that issue very often. And then we see how people divide because of this. So some Jews are actually divided about this issue, so that the people who are wearing the head cover are sort of a group together, and the people who are not wearing the head cover are also a group together, but they do not interact with each other, and this can cause some conflicts. But it's not. Usually, it's not very dramatical. So it is something you choose, and it will probably affect how you socialize. But it's not very dramatic, and there are not like vendettas, etc.
So, in conclusion, we have seen these three religions and the woman's role in these religions. What we have agreed on is that every religion has positives and negatives, and both we think that, and also the religious individuals which we interviewed thought that there were down points of their religion and also positive things about their religion.
Yeah.
But we have agreed on, like Steve Prother said, to be open and try to see these both sides and try to understand religion, to comprehend what they're going through and how their life is.
Yeah, and what we also think about is the main title of the book of Stephen Prother, that God is not one. Because usually, at least, especially when it comes to the Abrahamic religions, a lot of Swedes, for example, believe that but basically they are all the same. But no, they're not. They're struggling with different issues, so we can see here what we wrote up in the interviews and the stereotypes, that they are very different, and they say quite different things, even though they share this monotheistic view. But I mean, they struggle with so different things. Islam is about submission, and Christianity is about salvation and etc. And getting rid of sin. And we see this as a proof that, well, God is not one, that each religion is unique and different.
And we have to learn to respect every religion. And most importantly, we really learn it's very important not to generalize and mix up different topics with religion. This can lead to conflicts and people being misunderstood and misinterpreted.
Yeah.
So that was our presentation.
Thank you.
We are sorry for the PowerPoint. We will send it to you in another mail. Thank you.
Thank you.